You're at 109 right now.
Welcome to the IC 109 podcast. I'm your host, Larry Wiggs. I'd like to talk about religion, religious philosophies, and ideals, those that I have come across uh, through the course of my travels and my life, and and my impressions of those things. That's what the topic of this podcast will be. Stick with me. I'm Larry Wiggs. This is the IC 109 podcast.
You're at 109 right now.
I'd like to begin by playing the a video, a YouTube video. You will not be able to watch the video unless you go to YouTube and you find the video on your own, but we're going to listen to the audio. In order to give proper credit to the creator of the audio, I must give his name and talk more about who he is. Well, that's kind of the inspiration or the impetus behind creating this particular episode of this podcast, because I want to talk about how I met him, this man whose voice you will hear in a moment, and I want to talk to you about what a magical moment it was to have met him and all of the meaning in that encounter. Okay, first we're going to listen to him. All right, his name is Robert Adan Williams. All right, so I'm going to play his voice. It's about a 5 minute and let's say 6 minutes, fewer than 6 minutes of recording that you will listen to. All right, so sit back, relax, and let's, I want to say, enjoy the ride. I guess, yeah, let's enjoy the ride together, shall we?
The heart is the hub of all sacred places. Go there and roam. The heart is the hub of all sacred places. Go there and roam. When Bhagwan Nityananda teaches us that of all the sacred places in the world, of all the masjids and mosques, of all the temples and synagogues, of all the cathedrals and churches, the holy mountains and sacred rivers, of all the pilgrimage sites, the tombs of great saints, where people go to lay down their burdens, to ask that their deepest wishes be granted, to honor and worship that mystery at the core of life, which gives us life, which breathes our breath and lights up our eyes and rests at the root of the power of speech, which some people call God. Those places are very important in our world because they help us remain oriented in our spiritual lives. But what Bhagwan Nityananda is saying is that of all the sacred places there are in the world, there is no place more sacred than our own inner being, the heart of our own existence. He's not talking about the physical heart that's beating in our chest. He's not talking about the heart that pumps our blood. He's talking about the heart at the core of this manifestation in which we find ourselves living and enjoying the knowledge I am. He's talking about the heart of consciousness, the heart of awareness, the very heart of our existence. This is the uncreated heart. It's unborn and immortal. It has neither beginning nor end. And this is the source of our true being. In fact, it is who we are. So, when he invites us to go there and roam, he's inviting us to turn within and find out where this heart is within our own being. The portal, the doorway to that space of the heart, the Hridayakash, can be found by following our breath into the center of our being. As I said before, when we breathe in, our breath disperses into a stillness, a nothingness, and we don't know quite where it goes. Yes, it goes into our lungs, it's true, but the sensation at the center of our being is that it just kind of empties out. And when we allow our mind to follow our breath into that space and to disperse, we find ourselves in a space of peace. It's only momentary, but it's there. And then we exhale. And as we exhale, at the end of that breath, again, our mind, along with our breath, disperses into an emptiness and a peace. And it's only momentary. But with our attention, if we give it our attention, that momentary peace expands. It embraces us. In fact, it envelops us. And we realize that there's more to ourselves than these physical bodies that we have taken ourselves to be. In fact, we begin to realize that that space of the heart within and that space where the breath disperses without is one space. We realize that this physical body is not so solid, that inner and outer are one space. One of the basic teachings to understand is that we are not the body. We are the consciousness that animates the body. We are the consciousness that produces speech and the meanings of words. We are the consciousness that illumines the eyes and makes them shine. That is who we are. And when we enter this space between the two breaths, we discover more and more what it means to live and roam in the sky of the heart.
To live and roam in the sky of the heart. Wow. As I listened to that presentation, I wrote some notes here. Let's see. Within and without. That reminds me of as above, so below. Breath. Our breath is so important. What else? Mystery. The mystery at the core of life. Mystery. All right. These are some of the notes that I jotted down very briefly. Now, let me get into this story. I think I don't know how to organize these stories, these tidbits, these factoids. So I'm just gonna have to, vomit them. Just put them all out there. All right. I did, however, watch a documentary. No, I don't think it was a documentary. It was some sort of show that was filmed or produced in 1992, and the purpose of the film was to show how America has changed and developed since 1492. And so they were making it very clear that 500 years is a significant amount of time, and change has occurred over that time. Let's see. Let's look at America and see where we are, so to speak. And so, 500 years is a part of that TV shows, that docu series. 500 years is sort of the um, not the premise, but it's I guess it's part of the major theme. It's definitely the I guess it's the domain. Like they're focusing on that area. So anyway, when I watched this, I got the idea. Hey, I think a lot of this um, that I want to talk about is, or rather, it falls within 1619 and 2019, right? That's 400 years. And that 400 year mark, if we're looking at, 1619 as the year, um, that it's a controversial year, but I think scholars, intellectuals agree that that's when the first slaves came to America. That's a controversial idea because oftentimes here in America we talk about our history as black people in America, as African Americans, American blacks. When we talk about our history as if we started at slavery. And so we have to know, we have to be certain, we have to be secure within ourselves that our history goes way beyond that. That's no place to begin a history for people, but here in America, for many of us, that's where this American saga begins, which in many cases is a deviation from the real history of the I want to say African, of the human, you know, who comes up from Africa. But rather than get bogged down in details like that, I just had to say that so that we're clear on my political and my uh, Afrocentric, perspective. Because I'm certainly not going to sit here and say that, you know, slavery is where my history began because that's not true. Anywho, 1619 until 2019. That's 400 years. And as long as I've been, alive, I've always heard, I think, from speeches by uh, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, mentioning 400 years. I've heard 400 years being uttered and repeated, echoed throughout, hip hop and rap, music, lyrics, songs. Um, and when talking about history, or rather, when talking about social change, whether it's civil rights, whether it's, political change in America, we talk about black Americans. American blacks have suffered for 400 years, right? So that's a, I guess, an overarching theme, or that's something that undergirds, all of this talk. Okay. So anywho, 400 years, 1619, 2019. All right. Now 2019 for me was a pivotal year because some magical things, magical events occurred, and those magical events, those things that occurred were related to my story, my book, 10-9, because it was that year that I was able to put together all of these isolated incidents of these encounters with these numbers, and I was able to make some sense out of all of these isolated incidents, and I was able to tell a story. I was only able to tell that story after the events occurred in the year of 2019, and I thought, well, isn't it quite opportune, quite serendipitous, quite a coincidence that of this year, in that year of all years, you know, after 400 years, it seemed so it was ready, you know, it was ready. I think biblically, if you look to the now, I'm not a big Bible reader, so that's why I can't quote the Bible. But the Bible is another source for 400 years that I think I've heard, mention my people, the Israelites, will be lost for 400 years, or something in Deuteronomy. I think I've heard that. Please excuse me for my ignorance. But anyhow, for 2019, for all of for the epiphany to occur, and for me to say, oh, I understand what this story is about. I understand what these experiences, what my experiences are about. It was a quite an opportune moment. It was quite appropriate. It was right on time. So up until that point, I had a bunch of isolated incidents where I was encountering the numbers 10 and 9, being assigned seats on airplanes in row 10 or row 9, or uh, like when I was in, excuse me, in Ethiopia. I was headed to the bathroom and I saw that the number 109 had been written on a door, and I thought that was peculiar because I was on the second floor. That number wasn't supposed to be there. And I immediately noticed those numbers because those numbers reference my or allude to my birthday. So I was like, who wrote that? Why is that there? Caught my attention. That was in Ethiopia. When I was in Peru, I hiked up Machu Picchu and I summited Machu Picchu around at 10:09 a.m. Or rather, I was atop the mountain. I looked around, and after taking selfies and just enjoying the views, I wondered, what else am I going to do? And that's when I looked at my watch and I saw 10:09 as the time. Technically, I saw 10:08, and I was like, you know what? Somehow I think these numbers, because I saw these numbers in Ethiopia, because I saw these numbers in Korea, in Japan, now in Peru, these numbers are communicating with me that this is a spiritual, these numbers are spiritual. And I thought to myself, maybe the spirits are communicating with me through these numbers. I should make my descent. It's a time. I don't know. It's a marker. When you see 10:09, you've completed your mission. You've done your angels, your guardian angels are pleased. The gods are pleased. Okay, you're done. Do something next. And so at atop Machu Picchu, I saw 10:09, and I thought, okay, that's when I'm going to go down the mountain. I've done what I came here to do, sort of thing. So Peru, Ethiopia. I mentioned Korea. In South Korea, I was learning the Korean language, and I learned that uh, the language was officially promulgated by King Sejong on October 9th. And I thought, what a coincidence that I'm putting forth the effort to learn this language, and this language was, promulgated. It was put forth uh, for the people to learn it and for it to be the official language of Korea on the day of my birth. I thought, wow, it's sort of like the language was born on the same day that I was born. Of course, not in the same year, but I just thought, what an auspicious day to have been born, 10/9. And so all of these connections, you know, started to resonate with me as they revealed themselves to me. And I thought, wow, I didn't know that, but look at that. That's pretty cool. I also mentioned Japan. And so in Japan, there's Shibuya Ichimarukyu, which means Shibuya 109. It's a fashion mall. And if you go to Tokyo, you will see this fashion mall. So again, just as I was in Ethiopia and I saw 109 written on a door, when I saw 109 atop this building in the city center, I wondered, what does 109 mean? Why had they chosen, those numbers? I'll give you an example. Yesterday I was attending a an event in downtown Los Angeles. It was a market for Black Americans, specifically. It's called Black on the Block, and a young man had the numbers 30 and 4 written on his shirt. And I told him, I said, listen, I have an understanding. I have different interpretations of my numbers, 109, and I see that you have 304, 304 written on your shirt. I said, what do those numbers mean to you? Well, uh, his 304 has more to do with his uh, sex life and being promiscuous, um, because as he explained to me, which, first off, I knew what 304 meant before, but I wanted to know if he had another interpretation. But no, there was no other interpretation. He said, "Remember when you were in grade school and it was a neat trick to write 304 or punch those numbers into the calculator, turn the calculator upside down, and it spelled out Ho, Hoe." I said, "Yeah, I remember that." He said, "Well, that's what this is all about. That's what these numbers mean to me." I said, "All right." I was hoping he had some other interpretations, but no. That was just the one. Anywho, yeah, so when I was in Japan and I saw 109, I was wondering, like, what interpretation, what does it mean? And it wasn't but until 2 or 3 years after I visited Tokyo for the first time and saw Shibuya Ichi Marukyu, Shibuya 109, that I learned that 109, well, now, excuse me, I learned about Japanese Goro Awase. Goro Awase is it's it's pun. It's a pun. It's a play on words. It's a play on words related to numbers. All right. So very much in the same way that 304 means, you know, promiscuous person, a whore, literally. 10 and 9, uh, if it's what is it? If it's pronounced using some of the varied Japanese number systems, then when uttered, it can sound like the name of the city, Tokyo. All right, let me say that again because so if you know the Japanese numbers, ichi ni sanshi go roku, etc., etc., etc. Ichi is one, ni is two, ichi ni san is three, whatever. Okay. So if I were to say ichi maru q, I'm saying 109. Okay. However, you could also say to q, all right, because instead of calling each number 109, you could also say 10 9, right? Because we have a 1 and a 0, that's 10, and then you have the number 9. And so by saying to means 10 and 9 is q, okay? So Tokyo, Tokyo. Doesn't Tokyo sound like Tokyo? And the only difference is the final vowel sound. It's not a U, but an O. All right. So basically, it's a play on words because Tokyo is so close to Tokyo. It is a popular number. I think in Japan, because they even have uh, corporations, they even have conglomerates named Tokyo. Now, in one sense, Tokyo means Tokyo, and I think Kyushu or some, it's a truncated version of some other names, Tokyo, Kyushu, something something something. So that's where they get the Tokyo. But at the same time, if you're playing with these names and you're converting the names from, I guess, Roman characters into, what is it, Hindu, Arabic numbers, the numbers that we use, then you're going to get something different. So rather than say Tokyo, you can also say, hey, Tokyo also sounds like, or it means 10-9. So there's just a lot of ways of looking at this and playing with it. So anyhow, the interpretation of these numbers, they're varied. Whew, that's a lot to explain. I hope you're still with me. Um, Now, just for, I guess, shits and giggles, let's look at 304. Okay, let me see. How would we say 304? I mean, foe, really. That's the hood vernacular, hood style, 304. Okay, anyhow. Ichi ni san shi. Okay, so 4 is shi. All right. San ichi ni san is 3. So san maru shi. San maru shi would be 304. San maru shi. Now, there could be another way because I don't know how to say 30. All right, 30 in Japanese, and then just add the ichi ni san shi, the 4. What would 30 be in Japanese? I don't know. So anyhow, you see what I'm doing? Thinking about the numbers, thinking about what words or what sounds are created when we look at the numbers and when we utter the numbers in different styles and formats. Because you can look at 109 and say 109, 109, 10-9. Yeah, I think those are the only ways. But yeah, you could do it, all that, or you could say nine more than 100. But I don't think anyone says that. That's just too awkward. Too many words. Okay, I have to take a breath here. Yes. So let's get back into it. 2019. That was the year all of those isolated incidents that occurred for me around the world that I have documented, and I will be publishing a new book, a comic strip, where you'll see depictions of those encounters that I've had in graphic form in my new book, my comic book. Anyhow, it took place in 2019 when the story of 10-9 came together, and the story resulted in a poem. It wasn't a story that I wrote in prose format. I attempted to write a rap, and the rap was not, it didn't flow. I couldn't rap to a beat, so I had to capitulate, acquiesce, and just accept the fact that it was not for me to rap. It was a poem. And so I wrote the poem. And then I put the poem in the book because the poem basically tells the story of these numbers 109, of what they mean, and of these isolated incidents and how they aren't isolated incidents really. Really, they were, I want to say, calls to action, but the call to action didn't I didn't answer the call to action but until 2019 when I understood what my purpose was. But all of the moments prior to 2019, March 2019, these were moments that were calls to attention. Pay attention, Larry. Do you see these numbers? Okay. When the time comes, when the time is right, you will see these numbers. You will see other, or rather, excuse me, other events will occur, but you will see these numbers, and these numbers will be your signal to say, hey, now is the time. Something like that. So, anywho, I saw these numbers all over the world. Now, where do I go from here? Breath. See, it's related to uh, the presentation given to us by Robert Adan Williams, because in his presentation he mentions breath. Now, here's the story about breath, about breathing, okay? So there I am in my world of 109, having had some experiences in 2019 that piqued my curiosity and just really resonated with me at that time. And because I was spearheading the movement of 109, I'm going in this direction with 109. Um, I took ownership of my purpose, and I took ownership of these numbers because they were my numbers. It was my birthday. These are my numbers, okay? And then I thought, well, if I'm going to write a book, then I'm also going to sell the book, and I have to, I need a copyright and trademark and these sorts of things. So I was surprised when I looked online and I found a company that used 109 in its name. The company is or rather, it was a 501c3 nonprofit organization, but it was registered and it was fully functional, and it had a CEO, and it was a very vibrant, alive organization. Um, over the course of the last 5 years or so, the company is now defunct. The company has gone out of business. Um, but in 2019, when I found that company, I did a quick search online and I saw that the name of the company is 109 World. That piqued my curiosity. I thought, hey, 109, that's my number. I'm writing the book about 109, and I'm going to have, you know, I have some things to say around this number. What could you possibly have found, of value in these numbers? Did you find as much value in these numbers as have I? Personally, I've just found a wealth of value. I thought, wow, this, the story led to the book. The book could lead to, other, endeavors. Excuse me. So I just thought, wow, someone else out there, maybe has the experiences that I've been having, and I needed to reach out to someone to perhaps build community, but also to learn. So I contacted the CEO or the company, and then they emailed me back. I emailed them with the question, "Why did you name your company 109 World?" And they replied, "Well, it's because," and then they went into the whole explanation. Now, the explanation and the meaning and the information they gave me when explaining why they chose 109 World as the name of their company, all of that blew me away because it was an interpretation that I was unfamiliar with. They were introducing me to ideals that I had never learned about, never heard of, and it was I was being called into a direction that I had never gone in. This was new territory for me. However, because those numbers were guiding me, then I willingly, went in that direction to seek more information. Now, by seeking more information, um, I didn't physically go anywhere different than I would normally, go. You know, outside of my routine, there were no changes to my routines. I did not make a pilgrimage or a trip to India, for instance. But the interpretation that I learned was related to India, Hindu traditions, um, Eastern philosophy. And it's interesting also that part of the part of my discovery of what 109 means to um, the Hindu world was actually led by my colleague who may be he may be Hindu. He's actually Indian of extraction. He's from South Africa, but um, he's Indian. Okay, and I recall asking him, Calvin, is his name? I asked him. I said, Calvin, I keep seeing these numbers, you know, and I don't know what they mean. I have no idea. This was back in 2019 when I asked him, and he said, "Well, Larry, why don't you ask Google?" I had not even thought to ask Google because I guess it wasn't such a pressing issue. It wasn't something that I was deeply um, uh, embedded in, deeply ensconced in, deeply. Um, I wasn't researching it. It was more so something of a novelty, something of a curiosity. Like there's 109 again. Interesting, you know. Um, So I really wasn't obsessed with 109. It was just, oh, okay, well. But when Calvin said, search Google, I thought, man, why didn't I think of that, but Calvin's Indian. That's the point I want to make. Calvin's Indian, and he led me in a direction to find one interpretation that ended up leading me to another interpretation from the company, and that interpretation actually found or lies in Hindu tradition. So um, I just had to add those little details in there. All right, so Calvin was part of the story. Breath, yes. So breath. So the connection with breath and breathing is this: the interpretation that I learned after emailing someone who worked at 109 World, this company that no longer exists but existed at that time. It was 2019. Um, she told me that 109 is the number of beads on the mala necklace. I had never heard this before. She went on to say that the mala necklace has 108 beads that are used for prayer, meditation, reciting mantra. And she said the 109th bead on the necklace is used as a marker, a place marker. So as you're chanting and you come to the 108th chant of the mantra, the 109th bead it's of a different size. It's larger than the other beads. It will identify you or it will call your attention to um, the fact that you've finished your chant. And if you're going to chant again, then you continue in the opposite direction along the necklace, right? And make your when you return, make the revolution, and you come to you when you arrive at the that large bead again, that will tell you to okay go back, right? So it's a like a pendulum swing from one end back to the other. All right. So she said also that the 109th bead, because it's larger, because it's a place marker, it is thought of as the bead that holds all of the other beads together. And so it's given its name of the guru bead because it's it's an important bead. It plays a particular role. Now, the guru bead may play a particular role in meditation, but it's not the most important bead. It's actually the 108 beads, or rather the number 108, that has greater significance, greater, um, that is, 108 is the sacred number in Hindu, Eastern religion. So this is all that she was explaining to me. And this is what I learned that was new, and it's related to our breath. Here's a here's an interesting factoid. The average healthy human being will breathe 108 times 100, which equals 10,800. All right. So a healthy human being will breathe 10,800 times during the day and also 10,800 times during the night. All right. So 10,800, you get that number by multiplying 108 by 100. So basically, I'm saying 108 is in there. 108 is in the number of breaths that we take during the day as well as during the night. So 108, you can think of 108 as breath, as the number that reminds us to breathe. And then the number of beads on the mala necklace, I guess it's reminding us to breathe as we are praying, chanting, saying our mantras. Okay? Now, all I knew in 2019 when I learned about the name of this corporation, 109 World, all I thought, first I thought, hey, they have my name. They have my numbers in their name, in the name of their company. So it's sort of a little competitive, what are you doing? You can't do that. That's my name. Little ego competition going on there. But then when I learned the importance or the significance of 109 from them, it was sort of like they were passing the torch to me because now I have a website, a podcast, YouTube, Instagram. I have taken on the mantle, you know, of carrying 109, and sharing 109 to the world. I've taken on the responsibility of doing that. Okay. So what's next? Um, da da da. Well, Robert Adan Williams, I guess, is next. Going back to what he said in his presentation. Okay. Um, I guess I have to talk about how I met him because it was a magical experience. So it was 2018, as best I recall, 2018. I was in Los Angeles. Excuse me. I was in Los Angeles, my hometown again, and yes, by 2018, I had already traveled to Ethiopia. And I think it was around May. I did some research. Was it May? Was it August? Okay, or maybe it was April. Okay, I'm unsure of when I was back in Los Angeles. However, I do have a way to find my travel dates. I still have my old emails from many years in the past, and I have flight confirmation, flight reservation, ticket reservation emails still in my email box. So I could certainly look at those to find the specific dates as to when I was in Los Angeles. But anywho, so I'm back in Los Angeles. In 2018, I was living and working in Saudi Arabia, where I taught English. But on this trip back to Los Angeles, I must have been on a vacation. It was either Ramadan, excuse me, or it was an Eid celebration. Ramadan is what, 6 weeks, a month and a half, and then the Eid celebration we would have a 1 or 2 weeks. Anywho, okay, I'm back in Los Angeles. I had already been to Ethiopia. I traveled to Ethiopia in 2017. That was a life changing experience for me. I was introduced to new information about Christianity, and I was certainly, taken aback by what I had learned. In fact, let me give you some more context, some more ideals. When, well, first off, when I was growing up, we went to private schools. My sister and I attended private schools in Los Angeles, Pilgrim School. Pilgrim School is a parochial school, which means that the church and the school are connected. And when we would go to Pilgrim, in addition to our regular classes, we would have chapel. So we'd go to the church and we'd sit through a service. That's where the parochial nature of the our curriculum came into play. So we were getting some education on the Bible. Even in high school, we had Bible study classes with Reverend Shackman. I remember that. Um, so we were being inculcated, you know, with ideals, Christian values from the First Congregational Church members, right? Um, Whatever that meant, because at that time I was, ecumenical politics. I was unaware of all of that stuff, right? We're just, going playing by the rules as best we can. Anywho, um, I remember being, or rather, going to churches in the black community. We once, or a few times, went to West Angeles Church of God in Christ. We went to um, the Presbyterian church that my grandmother, was a member of. We went to Christ Redeemer Church in Carson, near Carson and Compton, off of Rosecrans. My paternal grandmother went there, goes there. Um, my maternal grandmother went to the Presbyterian Church, or Hope Presbyterian. And then we would sometimes go to the church near our home over there, West Angeles, which I mentioned. So we would move around. We weren't so involved in the church. And even for a number of years, we did not even go to church, as a family. Sundays, we were still working, still, doing things, which is fascinating and liberating experience because we weren't so stuck, beholden to rituals related to the church and church groups and things. But anywho, so we were free-minded people, I suppose. But I held on to my Christianity. I think we all held on to our Christianity. If you ask us, and we'll tell you that we are Christians, whether we go to church and or not, is irrelevant. We are Christians. We've been baptized. That's the end of it. Of course, throughout my life, I've heard people say, I'm born again, and I'm a member of this church, and yada 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 yada. But as long as we were baptized, and you know, end of discussion. All right. Now, when I went to Saudi Arabia, I was exposed to Islam for the first time, but I was also exposed to beards. You can, as a man, you can wear a beard and not have any qualms about it. I remember personally another story in 2001 after the terrorist attacks. I was in college. I was growing my beard, and only because I was tired of shaving, or rather, it was expensive. It was too expensive for me to keep up my shaving routine. I stopped shaving, but it was a coincidence that I stopped shaving around the time that the terrorist attacks occurred, and the men who were responsible for the terrorist attacks, well, they, for the most part, wore beards because they were Muslim. So the story goes I was walking on my college campus, minding my own business, heading to class, and a white student who saw me and was walking in the opposite direction decided that I was a terrorist too, or rather, that they would make me feel uncomfortable simply because I looked like the terrorist because of my beard. So the person saw me and they called out terrorists. And I thought, how dare you? Because that person had all that person knew is that I am a brown man with a beard. And I had no connection to Islam because that's what they were doing. They were demonizing Muslims. That's what that student was doing. That's what was happening in America at that time. Muslims were being demonized. Oh, the Saudis attacked America. We must kill them. You cannot trust the Muslims. I had no connection to Islam, none whatsoever. I was a Christian. And even Christians grow beards. So this was just a completely racist remark, just completely uncalled for, but it was a sign of the times. So anyhow, yeah, that's my story about you know racism in America around September 11th, being called a racist because of my beard. Um, how did I get off talking about that? Oh yes, yes, Islam. So I found my way. I found a job in Saudi Arabia after teaching in South Korea for a number of years, nearly 10 years in South Korea. So now I'm in Saudi Arabia. By the time I got to Saudi Arabia, well, I was still a Christian. I was still a Christian. Um, but now I was in a world where for a man to have a beard, it was acceptable. It was completely fine, which I love that fact because I'm not interested in shaving at all. Another story, when I was younger, before, Saudi Arabia, before Korea, before ever traveling abroad, I was in America stuck trying to find jobs, trying to find work. and not being successful at it. And I just noticed, I remember envying looking at my Indian counterparts in these offices, these office buildings in like Santa Monica, California, and I just envied them because they were accepted, and rather they could fit sort of a mold or a style more closely than I could, especially in terms of shaving. If the routine, if their daily routine called for them to shave in order to look presentable, well, for the most part, they didn't have to shave, curly haired beards and worry about folliculitis or razor bumps. That was my concern, man. If I shave just to keep up with the Joneses, just to keep up with these white boys and these Indians, these Asians who do not grow beards, I'm the one suffering here. I have to pay more for these razors. All they have to do is wake up in the morning, shower, maybe shampoo, and head out the door. Get dressed and head out the door. But I'm stuck with moisturizing my skin, shaving, and this whole routine, unnecessary kind of stuff. All I'd like to do is roll out of bed and go to work like they do. So by the time I was in Saudi Arabia, I finally got the chance to basically roll out of bed, get dressed, and go to work and not worry about my facial hair because everyone had facial hair. It was customary in Saudi Arabia to have, facial hair. Anywho, it was along with the facial hair that I learned to accept myself or to learn more. Yes, no, as I said, to accept myself. And I thought, wow, I don't have to conform to the society. I just have to live in the right society. Because Saudi Arabia was, for me, for the time being, the 2 years and some change that I lived there, that was the right society because I felt quite comfortable there as a black man with a beard and a good job. So, anywho, the thing about being in Saudi Arabia, living there, experiencing the culture, experiencing, five prayer calls throughout the day, and, businesses closing their doors during the prayer calls, basically the city shutting down 5 times a day, at least for 30 minutes, often for 30 minutes at a time for prayer. Maybe less. I might be exaggerating. I wasn't really counting. Some prayers are shorter, might take 15 minutes, but the longer prayers, 30 minutes plus. The businesses would be closed. Anywho, when I was in Saudi Arabia for the first time, I was personally called to the religion. Come to come to this side. Convert to Islam. Be like us. You are like us. Come, accept Islam. But I was reluctant to do that only because I had heard that the statistics show that um, a great number of prisoners convert to Islam. And I thought, well, it's kind of cliche for a man to go to a prison and then to learn of Islam and then, convert to the religion. Now, I was not in prison. I was not a prisoner by living in Saudi Arabia. However, when you compare the mm, the lack of access to a number of vices that you have in America, when you compare the lifestyle in Saudi Arabia to life in America, I'm sure that many people would never want to entertain the idea of living in Saudi Arabia because you lose all of those all of the access to alcohol, certainly marijuana, drugs, um, clubs. There are no clubs to interact with women. In fact, interacting, talking to a woman is basically forbidden. If she is not your blood relative or if she is not your spouse, then you should not talk to another woman. This is a rule for men. This is decency and modesty in their society. And then what else? Women could not drive. They could not until 2018. I saw the change in the culture, but prior to 2018, women could not drive. Movie theaters did not exist. There was a 30-year drought. There were movies, Western movies were not available in movie theaters. There were no movie theaters in Saudi Arabia for 30 plus years. So imagine that. You had no movie theaters to go to, no clubs, no possibility of talking to, an attractive woman you may see anywhere, no alcohol, certainly no drugs. There's a long list of other activities that are basically forbidden, are taboo in Saudi Arabian society. But yeah, it was basically kind of like a prison. Well, of course, there are ways to get around it. There are designated locations, designated areas that are cut off from the Saudi Arabian society at large where you can drink alcohol. It is available. And talking to women is possible, especially if they are foreign women. All right. They have these areas, they have these compounds where people live behind these tall walls, and you're basically, it's a society within a society, and all of the rules that the others, live by, you know, behind those walls, you can get away with all of that other stuff. Anywho, it's like a prison. And so when I learned that so many black men converted to Islam in prison, I was like, well, I don't want that to be my story. Living in Saudi Arabia isn't a prison, but as I explained, it kind of is. But you know, I didn't want that to be my story. Tupac Shakur has a song called "I Ain't Mad at You," where he talks about his a good friend of his, a best friend who went away to prison and then he converted to Islam and he no longer wants to do the things that he once did. And the Tupac's response to that is, "Well, hey, life has changed. Your life has changed. I'm not mad at you. I'm not mad at you for changing. Go ahead and do your thing. I'm not mad at you." So, in my case, life in an Islamic society was new to me, um, and I certainly felt the pressure to convert to Islam. However, because of what I knew about, prisons and being converted, I thought, nah, I'm Larry Wiggs. I'm Larry Wiggs. I'm unique. I'm different. I have my own story, my own path. Don't don't try to lump me in with everyone else. But I certainly received dawah from my colleagues, some of my students. Come to Islam, become Muslim, pray with us, this, that, and the third. Now, what happened is in 2017, while living in Saudi Arabia, I took a trip to Ethiopia. And that changed my life because when I when I went to Ethiopia, then I really learned about the history of the faith that I pledged allegiance to. And not only did I, well, in seeing, or rather in learning the history of Ethiopia's, longstanding history, or yes, tradition of Christianity, I gained pride, I gained insight, and um, I don't know, fortitude. I was affirmed. I said, you know what? Ethiopia's Christianity is older than Islam, is older than, you know, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church is older than many churches around the world. And I found an affinity for Ethiopia. Everything that I learned about Ethiopia just brought me closer to Ethiopia. And I thought, you know what? I am okay being a Christian because now I've seen Christianity. I've learned something about Christianity that I never learned in America. And I've learned of a different type of Christianity in Ethiopia, one that I am more intrigued and more willing to learn about than anything that they could present to me in America. So I got some really good intel, basically. And I was like, I'm fine the way that I am. There's no reason for me to convert, you know. So when I returned to Saudi Arabia, then I had a new ideal about religion, about Christianity, and about Islam. Now there was nothing I did not gain. Um, yes. Let me make this one distinction. In America, I was I was being taught through the media. I was being taught to love Christianity but hate Islam. Right? They were demonizing the Muslims because of September 11th, and it's a terrorist, religion, and all of these things. But when I was in Ethiopia, I learned the history of how I think Bilal and the Muslims came to the Christians in Ethiopia, and the Christians protected the Ethiopians. And I saw how Christians and Muslims lived side by side in Ethiopia, and I didn't see the tension. I didn't see the problems and the struggles that were made so clear to me in America, or rather, that were being promoted in America. I saw peace. But don't get me wrong, Ethiopia uh, is by far from a peaceful nation. There's plenty of internal strife among the ethnic groups. But anywho, um, I was fortified. I felt better about being a Christian when I after leaving, or rather after visiting, Ethiopia, and when I lived in Saudi Arabia. If anyone wanted to give me dawah, wanted to proselytize and convert me, I would just say thank you, but no thank you. I know more. I'm fine within my faith. I would rather learn more about your faith from afar. I can do my own research, but I'm not going to follow your, I don't know, the precepts and follow your society's rules. You know. So anywho, I did I did actually pray with Muslims. They told me come and pray with us, and I went. I went to a mosque and prayed with them, which I thought was amazing. because it showed their love for, humankind, for mankind. They said, yes, you can come. You be with us. Perhaps it would lead to conversion, perhaps not. In my case, it did not, but it certainly did not diminish. You know, I have a great respect for Muslims, right? Anywho, Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia. As I was saying, I was back in Los Angeles after living in Saudi Arabia, after having visited Ethiopia. Now I'm back in Los Angeles. Now, because I have this affinity, appreciation, and love for Ethiopian culture, food, um, women. At that time, I said, you know what? I want to learn the Ethiopian language, Amharic. And lucky for me, when I was back in Los Angeles, an Amharic lesson was available in Little Ethiopia. And so I decided that I would attend. Now, here's where the story gets juicy. Here's where I guess I tie all of this together and I let you know why I was, why I played Robert Adan Williams' presentation in the beginning. And I'll tell you about who he is. And finally, we'll get there to this story and how 109, was there. It called my attention at that time. Okay, so it's 2018. I'm back in Los Angeles. I'm driving. I'm driving on my way to Little Ethiopia, and I'm about to cross a street. I believe I was on Fairfax, Fairfax in Washington, Fairfax in Venice, Washington. I think that's the street. I'm about to cross the street. There's a bus. I noticed there's a bus, and if you're driving in Los Angeles and the bus needs to merge into your lane, proper protocol is you should yield to the bus. But I was in a rush to get to my class. I was running a little late and I didn't want to miss any of the lesson, didn't want to disturb the class by showing up late, etc., etc. But I had this bus situation. When the light turned green, I had a choice to rush ahead, causing the bus to wait for me and maybe other cars to pass it, um, or do the right thing and let the bus merge in front of me, yield to the bus, and then let the bus proceed. I figured if I yielded to the bus, if I did the right thing, if I yielded to the bus, I would probably be later for the class than otherwise. But I decided to yield for the bus because it's the right thing to do. When you're driving, it's the proper way. Who are you? Don't put your ego before, others. Look at the situation, assess it, and know that you're not the only person. The world doesn't, revolve around you. And so I yielded to the bus, and the bus passed me. And in that moment, I was in a rush to get to the classroom. I was, anxious, a little nervous that I would be late, anxious to get there, nervous, and now slightly frustrated because I had to wait for the bus to merge into the lane and then follow the bus, and I couldn't, all that kind of stuff. So all those emotions were playing on me, within me. But when I noticed, just as the bus pulled in front of me, when I looked at the bus's license plate, and I saw that the bus's license plate included the number 1, 0, and 9 in that order. I imagined that I was getting confirmation that 109 is a number that calls for your attention. You saw 109, you paid attention, that's good. And 109, seeing 109 on that license plate was confirmation that you did the right thing, Larry. You were supposed to yield for the bus, and that's what you did. Very good. Good job, Larry. So I thought about all of that. I said, wow, there's 109 on the back of the bus, on the license plate. So I snapped a photo as we're driving down Fairfax en route to Little Ethiopia. I finally get to Little Ethiopia after having had this experience and seeing 109 on the bus and all that. I finally get there to Little Ethiopia. I park my car and I rush into the Ethiopian Cultural Center where the Amharic, the Ethiopian language lessons are taking place. And so I get in there and then I'm shocked. I'm shocked because the class is basically empty. There's only one other student there. And because there was only one student, the class hadn't begun yet. I was only a short few minutes late, um, and I hadn't missed anything. So basically, I had no reason to rush. 109 was confirmation of that. You do the right thing. You don't worry. Don't rush and do other things. You do the right thing. Do only good every day, right? And I was like, man, there's no one else in here. I mean, there's one other gentleman here who's in the class. The class hasn't begun. Okay, now I'm here. There are two students. All right, there's a teacher. Okay, let's begin the lesson. And it was just like that. When I arrived, then it was like, okay, we can start now. We have a class. I don't think, thinking back on it, I don't think that that's how it went. I do believe that, when I showed up, then there was a shift that occurred. But before that, I don't think that the teacher was wasting the students' time waiting for others to show up. No, I don't think that's what was happening. Anywho, that student, my classmate, was Mr. Robert Adan Williams. And ego. There was a lot of ego. There was this, the ego was playing on me during that trip because I thought, I don't want to be late. I don't want to walk into the classroom and disrupt people. And I don't want people to look at me and say, ooh, look at this guy. I was trying to be the model student. Let me get there on time. Let me participate. Let me learn this lesson. Yada, yada, yada. Ego. Lots of ego played a part in this day. Now, when I saw my classmate, Mr. Robert Adan Williams, my ego continued to play on me. I thought, who is this man? Why does he want to learn Amharic like me? I know why I want to learn Amharic. I've been to Ethiopia. Have you been to Ethiopia, Mr. Williams? Why are you learning? What is your reason? I'm curious. There were these thoughts, these ideas that played with me. And the lesson proceeded. It was a very interesting lesson. We learned what we could learn in the time span, and when the lesson was over, throughout the lesson, I had, um, you know, maybe had chit chatted with Mr. Williams, and he was a nice gentleman. So by the time the class ended and we had our free time back, um, I was hungry and Mr. Williams was hungry, and he said, why don't we grab a bite to eat together? Now that we are classmates, why not, you know, grab a bite to eat together? And I said, sure, sounds like a plan. Because at this point, we had found that we weren't so we weren't unalike. We weren't what is it? We weren't different. We had something in common. So it was like, hey, simpatico. You know what I think it is? It was kind of as if we were sharing the same brain. I Big Mike, my buddy Big Mike has used that expression on me. He said, "You know what? I'll watch a YouTube video, I'll send you the link, or you'll watch a YouTube video and send me the link, and whatever video you're sending me, I've already seen it. It's like whatever you like, I like it as well. It's like we're sharing the same brain." That's what Big Mike said. He said, "Man, I think we're sharing the same brain." So it was kind of that way with Mr. Williams. Kind of felt like we were sharing the same brain because we were on the same wavelength. We wanted the same thing. We had the same affinity and appreciation for Ethiopia, for Ethiopian food, culture, and language. And our appreciation and affinity for Ethiopia brought us together. So we went to the restaurant, we sat, we ordered our food, we ate, at a table across from each other, and we talked, we chit chatted. And during that conversation, I learned more about his life and about his great, great um, ancestor. And I learned how fascinating a story, a history, you know, um, his family has and what he's connected to. Excuse me. And and I was delighted to learn that. And I thought, wow, that is truly remarkable that someone with such a rich history is right here in Los Angeles. And I had the pleasure of attending a class with him, meeting him, sitting across from him at the table and sharing a meal with him. I thought, man, this is magical, serendipitous. Just wow, I'm so lucky to have had that experience. Now, with regard to his great great relative, I think a great great uncle, a book was written about his great great uncle because he was a fascinating character in history. The story goes his Mr. Williams's great great relative, I think it was his great great uncle. Well, he was a black man in America, an American black man who was born into slavery, but it was towards the end of slavery when he worked and let's see, he learned, so he learned a skill, learned a trade, but he was born in Texas and he was near the Texas or excuse me, the U.S. Mexico border, and so he was able to cross the border and figure out things for himself in Mexico. And what he discovered in Mexico is that there were greater opportunities for black people in Mexico, albeit those opportunities came with a requirement that one speak Spanish, and Mr. Williams's great great uncle did speak Spanish, so he was able to take advantage of the opportunities that presented themselves in Mexico. So much so that he actually became, excuse me, he became a Mexican millionaire. So the story goes he was born a slave, a black American was born a slave in America. He crosses the border and he figures out a way to become a Mexican citizen, a Mexican businessman, or rather to he represented himself. He was passing essentially, you know. He was passing as Mexican when he crossed the border. He had a business, he had a going concern, a business, and he was able to become a millionaire. So on one side of the border, he was a very unlucky, you know, or anyone, any black American born in America at that time was very unlucky. But look at the example of William Ellis, who was able to cross the border and find success. And William Ellis also made ways or tried to bring more American blacks across the border to Mexico to settle. As I learned by reading the book, that wasn't so easy because being an American black slave meant one thing, and freedom in Mexico meant another, albeit it required that you spoke Spanish. Those American black slaves, or excuse me, those American black formerly enslaved people who found themselves in Mexico, many of them returned to, or rather willingly returned to America and willingly returned to, you know, their enslavement because it was difficult to, or rather impossible to learn to speak Spanish and function in Mexico society, you know, being ignorant of Spanish. That was a sad reality that I learned through reading the book. I haven't finished the book, by the way, but I've gotten quite far in it. But there I was in Little Ethiopia, sitting across from William Ellis's great great descendant, and we, for what I learned about the Amharic Ethiopian language, and what I learned about Robert Adan Williams' life and his family's legacy, I was very surprised and delighted to learn these things. And then for me to have seen that bus 109, that was just the cherry on top because it was a call to my attention. It confirmed that I had done the right thing, but then it set the tone for the rest of the day because everything that I learned was just magical. So that whole day was just a magical, encounter. During the presentation, Robert Adan Williams said mystery at the core of life. And so 109 has up until 2019, 109 has been a mystery. It had been a mystery. And I learned that it is about our breath. I learned that 109 is the guru bead on the mala necklace. Guru meaning enlightenment, it means connection, bringing together ideals, you know, and things. And so I found that it meant something to me. It found that it gave my life purpose because in drawing connections between civilizations, um, religious organizations or religious traditions, Islam, Christianity. Um, I was able to, and even well, in Buddhism in Hinduism, um, and even Judaism. In learning more about these religions, I was able to form a greater understanding, of who I am. So much so that I found, hey, there's change for what? Love. Love is at the root of it. If you can respect your fellow brother, fellow man, and not be so petty as to look at the look at those differences as a reason to, dislike and not to care for, or to not to give a duty of care, or not to abide by what a duty of care, not to give a duty of care to someone because they are different from you. That's not it. You know, but at the core of life, life is a mystery. He said that, and so that reminded me of the quote by Albert Einstein, where Albert Einstein says that uh, life's mysterious nature is makes it, interesting and beautiful, and we must sort of embrace. I'm paraphrasing, of course. We must embrace, life's mysteries. It's a powerful statement by Albert Einstein. Have I said enough? I think so. I wanted to introduce Robert Adan Williams' um, presentation. We listened to that at the beginning of more than an hour's worth of, my discussion here. Um, I wanted to talk about the years 1619 and 2019 because when I wrote the book 10:9, it was a 400-year mark, which was auspicious. It was significant. I think it had biblical. It echoed some biblical verses that said 400 years. You know, after 400 years, my people will rise up. Something I think that's in the Bible. Um, there's so many other ideals. I did not mention much about Judaism, but there's even more that I've learned that is also related to Judaism with regard to 109, with regard to the Kabbalah, with regard to the Maccabeans, with regard to Jesus. Now, the one thing I'll say about Jesus is what I learned about Jesus when I was in Saudi Arabia is that the Quran, in the Quran, uh, Jesus, the prophet Jesus, is mentioned more frequently, more often than the prophet Muhammad, and peace be upon them. That's an idea I had never heard of. I didn't know anything about that in America. And when I learned that, that was like, wow, because it underscored this idea that Muslims love Jesus. It's like, oh wow, that's fascinating, because you think, I mean, if you're ignorant, then you don't know, and so that idea within itself is tremendous. So there's I mean, if you want to talk about wars, I could see there being wars between Jews and a a faction or a collection of Christians and Muslims against the Jews, because the Jews love Moses. That's their prophet, peace be upon him. But then the Muslims and the Christians love Jesus, peace be upon him. So you have a greater similarity versus a difference. Hopefully there will be no wars, but as I've understood it or learned, somewhere in the Bible they said that the sons of Abraham will always be at war, something like this. I don't know. Again, I'm not the Bible scholar, but just these are some ideals, some things that I picked up, some things that I learned over the years, and I need a place to put all of these ideas, to park my ideas. And I guess I've spent such a long time talking, an hour and a half talking about um, these ideals. I suppose this recording is something similar to an Alan Watts recording. You can sit and just listen to Alan Watts talk about, what is it? Occidental philosophy. Occidental, that's Western philosophy, and then Eastern philosophy, You can just hear him talk about that kind of stuff, putting everything into perspective. So if you gave this a listen and you sat with me and gave this a listen, then I appreciate you. Only problem with doing this like this is that I'm doing this alone. I'm doing this alone in terms of I'm just speaking in an empty room. I'm just talking. I've written my notes, but then I'm just recording my voice here. Did I miss anything? Let me check my notes. No, 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 no. Within and without, above, as above, so below. I think I've covered a lot. I've covered a lot. And I guess that's the end of this. So, as I do, I will say peace and blessings, and we're out. I'm out. Okay.
You're at 109 right now.